All right. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to another live stream here at Motion University. We're excited to have you all with us. And today we're kind of kicking off our new series, kind of with episode one of what we're calling Lessons from the Journey. So we're hopefully going to be just interviewing and talking with different folks on kind of learning, kind of pulling back the curtain a bit on their journey to where they are today in terms of their film career. And so hopefully giving you guys some practical advice and knowledge along the way. And yeah, so it looks like we are live and going good. So let us know in the comments. First of all, if you have any questions, but second, if there's any issues with the stream or anything, I'll be watching that. We also have John Clay Burnett here, and he is going to be joining us. Let's see. There we go. There he is. Hey, JC. So he's going to be monitoring comments and things like that with you guys. Or basically, he's going to be facilitating conversations. I'm kind of going to be in the back end. But before we do that, I just wanted to give you guys kind of a quick introduction to our guest today. We're excited to have Kevin Peeples with us. So just a little bit of introduction to him. Oh, and I just realized I didn't actually transition to JC when I did that. So let me switch to this mode. There we go. There's me. So yeah, so anyways, I just want to give you guys a quick introduction to Kevin Peeples. So I met Kevin Peeples when we were on the Overcomer film project with the Kendrick brothers, and Kevin was our boss, and so we were working in the behind the scenes department. Kevin was doing all the EPK content for that film, and so there you go. You can see a picture of some of us on the EPK team, and that was just a lot of fun. I really got to kind of get to go know Kevin a bit more and kind of see what he does with that side of things, and also hear his story, which is actually really a fascinating story, just seeing God work, kind of working his way from the bottom, and just kind of lessons learned, stuff like that. And also, we got to see at the film festival the other year the film that he did, Like Arrows, which if you haven't seen, it's a great film. And he was done, if I remember correctly, with Family Life Today, originally for their family course that they were doing, but turned into a feature film, and it's really cool to see kind of like it's like showing the whole lifespan of a character, and you don't normally see that in film, so that was really cool. So before we jump in, just wanted to give you guys a little bit of background on Kevin in case you don't know him. He started his own production company and produced music videos, commercials, and stuff like that. And if I remember correctly, Kevin, you mentioned one of them was like trending number one music video for 3 weeks in a row. Now that was like MTV days or whatever that was. I know a little before my time, to be honest, but yeah, and then directed several feature-length documentaries, produced EPK and marketing content for War Room and Overcomer and other films and such like that. Also directed Like Arrows, like I mentioned, for Family Life Today, which I believe is on Amazon. You can watch it. You can purchase it other places as well. And then is now also directing the next feature film centering around the subject of adoption for the Kendrick brothers. So kind of coming all the way from, starting out at the bottom in some ways, and now directing as like a studio director for, assuming if they're still the same, that'd be with Sony. So yeah, so with that, just a quick bio on Kevin. Kevin Peeples is a husband, father, and filmmaker who resides in Rock Hill, South Carolina, with his wife and 8 children. Kevin brings 17 years of experience in the industry as a writer, director, editor, and cinematographer. He has written and directed multiple feature and documentary films, a successful Christian apologetics YouTube series, and countless commercials and music videos. He's passionate about mentoring younger filmmakers and has helped many filmmakers market their films into box office success. So with that, Kevin, great to have you on the stream.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and it was so much fun to work with you guys on Overcomer and create some crazy things. We did that music video. I think was really where we kind of pedal to the metal. We had to do a lot and deliver a lot in a short amount of time.
Yeah, no, that was definitely a blast, and I know some of the folks have seen it. So if you haven't seen some of the stuff we did, you should probably buy the Overcomer DVD because I believe it's on there. So, but yeah, so Kevin, I would love for you just to dive in and kind of give us a little bit of a background on you, kind of give us the overview of your story. And then kind of once we finish up there, we'll dive into some questions from the audience, as well as just kind of conversations around each of those moments in your timeline.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, as Andrew said, I'm Kevin Peeples, and I am a father of eight. I've got my own little film crew that helps me, and they're just they're a blast. The youngest is 7 months, actually 8 months yesterday, and our oldest is 10. So we've got a full house, and that's really where my heart is. That's one of the lessons I've learned is really just putting family first and not trying to pursue film and career and technical knowledge, at all costs. But just pouring into the family and working together for God's kingdom. So yeah, I started a production company when I was in high school. I'll give you a quick overview of kind of my past. I have two halves. I've got kind of my corporate business side, and then there was a switch, and now I'm doing feature films and working in the film industry and directing and writing and those kind of things. So I'd say I have an interesting journey getting here. And you hear people say, climbing the ladder, and so I thought, I'm going to go out and kind of make my own ladder. I don't want to start as a PA. I don't want to start at the bottom. I'm just going to start a production company. And the first piece of advice that I give people when I started my company was don't have a fallback plan. All the other people that were in my graduating class that were interested in film all had a backup plan, and they ended up working their fallback plan. None of them were in film. They were trying to get there. Some were working at theme parks. Some were doing things that were somewhat in the industry. But, even people came back from college 4 years later and tried to apply for jobs at our production company because they couldn't find any work. And so that was really just how I went into it, was don't create a fallback plan, put everything into creating that company. And, that's how we did it. So quickly, I'll tell you a funny story, kind of how we started. I've been doing weddings and small little things kind of on my own growing up. I actually started editing and delivering on VHS. Kind of shows you how far back that was. We would shoot on tape, and I had a little switcher from Radio Shack that had inputs for VCRs and a CD player and a microphone. So you'd have to mix live from your camera into the final tape, and then you could add music and add narration, and you do it all live. And if you mess up or make a mistake with your voiceover, then you got to start over. And so that's how I first started delivering on VHS tapes. And then there was a guy at our church who came by and was telling us that his company needed a video. And he said some company quoted them 12. And I said, we'll do it for 10. And I had no idea what that meant. And I didn't know that they were talking about 10,000. I just said, hey, we'll do it for 10. That's cheaper than the other guys. And, went back to school the next week and then saw him at church the following Sunday. We're still in high school here, and he said, "Hey, I showed some of your videos that you've done, for the church to our company, and they loved it, and they want to hire you." And I was like, "Hire me for what? What are you talking about?" I didn't even know what was going on. And so, long story short, we got the job, and we were barely starting a company. We were doing church videos and weddings, and I said, "We're going to need 100% deposit up front." And they were kind of looked at us a little sketchy, but agreed to it. So we used that money. We spent all of it on equipment. We had 30 days to create a company name, get apparel, all those kinds of things to look as professional as possible to go and shoot this, $10,000 video, which for us was unimaginable. And so we borrowed all of our lights from our high school theater department and drove up to New York and shot this video that is locked away in the vault that we're not going to show anybody because it's quite embarrassing. But so that's kind of how we started. And I still have two or three pieces of that equipment from that first job, 17 years ago. And so didn't get in debt, but that's how we started and started building a company. Ran a production company for about 13 years, shooting commercials, music videos. Like Andrew said, back then we didn't have YouTube, Vimeo. YouTube started kind of right after we started our production company, and nobody was really on it. You went there for those fail videos and cat videos, those kinds of things. And so we started doing music videos, and we got up to $40,000-$50,000 budgets for the music videos, and they were on MTV, VH1. We did Bo Bice and got number one on their top 10 countdown that they did on Saturday mornings, like 3 weeks in a row. I think Madonna had a video that week, and what was the other guy? I can't remember his name. Some other people from American Idol were on there. Uh, so yeah, so we won awards. We got the successes, and I was pursuing all the knowledge that I could. Was trying to be that guy that could answer any movie quote and had all the best gear. You know, we had red cameras, we had an office, we had all this stuff, and it just, you know, it wasn't getting anywhere. And I got to a point where I went to an after party at a film festival, and I overheard a pastor talking to another musician that was there, and I kind of inserted myself into their conversation. And I've got a slide here with it. So he was talking to the musician, and I kind of inserted myself, but it said, you know, what I took away was that, you know, God didn't create you to be a filmmaker or a musician or whatever job you are. And I was like, what? You know, that's what I've been told is, you know, this is what God created you to do. And this pastor told this musician, he said, you know, God created you to glorify him. And I said, well, yeah, of course, that's obvious. And then he looked at this guy and he said, if God took away your sight, if he took away your hands, could you still fulfill your purpose? And that's when I realized that I was idolizing my career, that I knew that if God took away my sight, if I got in an accident or something I couldn't see, I couldn't edit, that I would feel purposeless. And that's when I knew that I was just wrapped up in this thing. I was doing it all for the wrong reasons. And so I said, you know, I've got to walk away from this. And I was really closed. I had my fist clenched, and I said, I don't want to give this up. I want to direct a film one day. Like, you know, I'll give you everything, but I want to direct a film. I want to be able to get there. And God pried that open and took it away. And the next thing I knew, there was a prayer meeting in town for War Room. War Room was coming to our hometown, and so I kind of prayed my way into that. Got in there, and there were no positions open. And long story short, God opened the doors and got me on that film, and really put me in a place to learn humility, to kind of start at the bottom. And maybe we can get into that later of that funny story of how I got on that film. But I basically created a prayer strategy that helped see some answered prayers, taking some advice from the Kinnick brothers, and got on War Room and started doing behind the scenes at the bottom. And I guess what, 5 or 6 years later, next thing I know, I am being offered to direct films, and I'm kind of in a studio director position, which as a kid, you never really think, you know, I want to be a studio director. You think, you know, I want to make my own films, write and direct and be in charge of everything. But studio directing is more or less kind of a work for hire, where you get hired for your skills, but the project belongs to somebody else. It's their film, you know, things like that. And you do your part, but then you walk away from it. And you don't have to do the fundraising, you don't have to do the marketing, you know, those types of things. So that's kind of where I'm at. And, you know, it was really not having a fallback plan to start with, and, you know, really crafting a prayer strategy. And we can talk more in detail about that in a little bit. And then really just looking for humility, trying to die to myself and not search after, you know, all the knowledge. Like, I'm not that guy anymore that you can come to and you hear a movie quote and you can name that movie. Or, you know, I can't tell you the top cameras that are on the market, because I just don't have time for that. You know, I balance, you know, the time for my family, and I'm not even the best at what I do. I don't even know why I get hired sometimes, because I'm like, there's people out there that are so much more talented than I am. But you know, that's, you can just see that's God's hand saying, here's where I want you, and I want you to minister and work in this place. And, you know, you follow the Lord on it. So that's kind of where I am today. And I work with the Kinnick brothers quite a bit. When I'm not directing, I'm helping them market their films. So I'm a video marketing editor, which means I basically create any video piece besides the film. And sometimes besides the main trailer, I create all the pieces. So from teaser trailers to marketings to clips, things that go out to ministry partners, bookstores, all those kinds of things, everything you see on Facebook. And so kind of help create and market videos through there. So I'll hand it back to you guys if you guys have any questions we want to get to, or you want to ask me questions to dive in to my journey.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. It's super fun to hear your story. So JC, I'm gonna let you kind of take over from here and just kind of if there's any, I'll pop in if I have any other questions, thoughts. But yeah, just to kind of dive into maybe some of the lessons from that journey.
Yeah. Well, that's really quite a quite a path. Um, even just in the way of starting and getting to work with those folks, um, those are some really neat opportunities to have been involved with. I'm curious because it sounds like you're directing and editing now. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool. And do you primarily work with the Kendricks, or do you work for other companies, other films, or are you doing primarily just the marketing, video editing stuff for the Kendricks?
At this point in time, it's primarily for the Kindred Brothers. I started on War Room doing behind the scenes, which also turns into the bonus features and special features that end up on the DVD. So all those exclusive features and things like that, which is really it's like shooting a documentary, and half of it is shooting a documentary without a story. You're just capturing as much as you can capture, and then half of what you capture will be used, or half of your time will be used to market the movie, which is more film footage, more interviews, EPKs, those types of things. And then the other half is the behind the scenes technical side, which I've learned in the faith based industry. There's a lot more focus on the heart and the life change and the message, and not as much the technical. The audience doesn't really care as much about what drone you have or how many cameras you have, or special camera tricks that you're doing. There's that audience out there, but whenever you start out, you want to make these big, awesome bonus features that you see on Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and things like that. But the Christian audience just doesn't want like a 10-hour behind the scenes thing on how technical the movie is, and Christian films are also um, not as much driven by the technical. Technology has advanced, and filmmakers really have all the things at their fingertips. But when we get into it, we're really trying to change people's lives. I would say almost more than we are trying to entertain them. And so the bonus features end up kind of matching that and reflecting that. You're trying to change lives as well. One of my favorite stories, and this is where true success, really comes in, is I got a text from Steven after War Room had come out on DVD, and there was someone who had just watched the bonus features and gave their life to Christ before they even watched the movie. And that's true success. That's really where it comes down to, this is why I do what I do. And so that really gives you the fuel to keep going and creating more stuff. And so I was shooting a promotional video for the Kendricks Pregnancy Center, the one that is attached to the church that they go to. And while I was there, Alex pitched this idea of Like Arrows with Family Life, and said, they wanted us to direct it. And, we just don't have time for it right now. We're getting ready for Overcomer, and we want to offer that to you. And, that's just a huge compliment and just to know that they could choose anybody, they could pick anybody, and they wanted you to direct it. And so that's how that film came up a couple of years ago. And so I'm really kind of bouncing back and forth between directing and editing, as well as writing. Like they let me kind of do the first stab, as well as the film we're working on now. I get kind of first pass on the script, and then they can make any changes and modifications that they want to. But there's a lot of trust there to be able to launch kind of the initial vision and the initial idea. So I think we wrote Like Arrows in about 5 weeks. Was our first draft, and we had maybe a week of revisions, and then we had to go into shooting. We had less than a month to cast and get all that going, and then we had a month of pre-production, and then we shot in 21 days. And then I did the first pass on editing as well, and I edited the film in about 3 weeks. It was a very, very rushed schedule. So in a little less than a year, we turned that project around, and it's on Netflix now. So
Talk to me a little bit more about that transition from the video production company to starting to work with the Kendrick stuff. You mentioned a prayer strategy in there, but I'm also, um, is there any downtime? Was there any transition there? Was it smooth? Was there any anxiety, or did things get quiet for a while, or was it pretty much back to back and smooth sailing?
It was anything but smooth. It was probably the most stressful and emotional time in my entire life, probably my biggest life event in that sense, because where I wanted to take the company, my business partners did not. I had uh, fired our largest client, which I think we had just under $100,000 contract for about 50 or 60 television commercials for a 12-month period. And we were just about finished with that run and going into a new contract. And just the just the workload and the intensity of finishing a spot, delivering a spot, and creating TV commercials. It's not just the one commercial you see. In your geography or your region in the country, you're going to see one version of the commercial, but there's 5 or 6 commercials for that one advertising campaign, and then each one has 7 or 8 cities that it goes to. So you've got to create 15 or 20 deliverables for every commercial. And so if they come out with a fix and say, hey, we want to change this price, or we want to change this item, or whatever it is, the turnaround time, you might be up all night hiring additional editors so you guys can deliver everything, get it to the TV station so they don't lose money on their spots. We've missed deliveries where, they call and they say, hey, there's been $40,000 of empty spots. We've had to run an old ad. Where's the commercial? And sometimes it's just the nature. They know when they make changes, there's no way to turn it around. So it's not always your fault, but it does get intense. And it was just the grind of doing that. And, just being in the business of convincing people to spend money they don't have on stuff that they don't really need, and kind of being like, this is the bulk of my time. I'm not coming home to dinner with my family because I've got to churn this stuff out. And just doing that for like 2 years was just so exhausting. And so I just had to let that client go and say, hey, this is not where God has me. I've gotten off track with my calling and my career. But I was really, I think one of the key things is I was the leader in my company, and I looked behind me and no one was following me. And that's when I realized that I was just being a boss, and was striving after my own goals, was striving after kind of worldly success. And when you realize that no one's following in you, you know that something's off track. And so that really started kind of that divide between me and my business partners. And, it doesn't seem as lucrative to say, hey, we're going to get rid of all of our clients that are bringing in all the money and paying all the bills and go search after doing feature films. And so it was a strenuous process. And it was also, the way I described it is, imagine, your house burning down and it's just you and your family, and you're standing outside and you have your car keys and you're like, okay, where do I go? You've got nothing left. I had built up our company. We were making a little less than $250,000 a year in the last 2 years or so before I resigned. And I think I left with about $2,000 of equipment, and that was it. And so, no clients, no nothing. I've got 4 or 5 kids at this point. How do I provide? It seems crazy, but at the same time, when you don't have stuff to worry about, when your house burns down, it is a big traumatic experience. But at the same time, you don't. There's not as much to worry about. There's people that jump in and want to help you out, and there's usually kind of a net that appears that you don't really realize. And so, for anyone considering making kind of a big move or a big faith move like that, if you really feel like the Lord is behind it and you're jumping out in something, it almost seems like the scarier it is, the more there's, or I guess I should say, the less there is to distract you, if that makes sense. And so you're kind of going out and starting fresh. You don't have baggage, you don't have anything like that. So getting to that point was very, very hard. But once you got there, you say, Lord, I can't do any of this on my own. There's nothing I can do. So I can't even worry. I can't stress about this because it's all out of my hands. This has totally got to be you to provide. And the work dried up. And there was this 6-week period that I could not find work. And I did stress about it, and I stressed about it, and I stressed about it. And the Lord had the plan all along. And the War Room shoot was 6 weeks, and it filled this gap that I had in my schedule. And I could just see that it was the Lord all the way. So it was was very, very stressful. I probably got some gray hairs from it, but really learned to trust the Lord through that in making big decisions.
Yeah, I can relate to some of those parts of the journey as well. Well, so you've got how many children now? 8?
I got 8 kids now. Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, the obvious question is if you're leaving $250,000 a year to provide for a family, to a lot of people, 8 kids is a lot. To some people, it's not. You're just getting started. So, but it's a lot of mouths to feed. I've got boys and they eat, and um, how do you provide? Is it paying enough bills now? It seems like such a weird question almost, but I think it's a very practical something, especially as a provider in the family you think about, and with something that's not like a constant paycheck. um, I think people might be interested to hear a little bit of not exactly dollars of exactly how much you make, but just how does that work? And having a lot of kids and still being in film, in video, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I've learned in those times where when the income gets low, you can stress about it and almost make family life even worse because you're trying to take things into your own hands. But I've learned it's taken a while, but I've learned, when there's that either that gap in income or trusting the Lord to bring it, you really just start to say, hey, I'm going to hang out with my family and pour into my family because I don't have work this week, and you end up feeling better. You end up feeling more energized, and your family is so much better for it. And that's really what they want from you is your time. The provision is important, but if you're providing so much that you're not even seeing them, you see that as common threads in so many movies and TV shows of overworking and those kinds of things. So everybody understands that kind of aspect, and so really learning to just hold on to that precious time, with your family. But at the same time, practically, there is, a little bit on credit cards that you have to do to kind of stretch it through. But one of the things I've really learned is, the one year in particular that we had 3 months without work. It was in between projects. Okay, I've got this really big project coming up. I just left this big project, but there's this 3 month gap and I've quit the corporate business, so I'm not going to go out and start finding, you don't want to ramp up your production business for 3 months. So what do you do in that particular time? And in the moment, it felt like we can't pay the bills, we don't have work. How are we going to provide those kinds of things? Put a few things on credit cards, groceries and stuff. But then you get to the end of the year and you say, hey, I only made $2,000 less than I did the year before. Like, how did that work out? And so, really, my advice would be looking at what's expected in taxes, look at what your write-offs are going to be, look at what you need, and plan that out. At the end of the year, it's different. It's hard to explain, but it's different than just saying, "Oh, here's my monthly budget that I need in order to make it to the end of the year." But say if $5,000 or $10,000 was knocked off of that for your entire year, what would you change? What would you balance, throughout that year, based on how much taxes are going to be due or not due, and how much business expenses you can write off on all those kinds of things. So taking the time to plan out your year in that way, if I would have done that when we had that 3 month break, knowing the income that was coming from my second project, I could have said, hey, we're only $2,000 short, rather than feeling like we're 3 months short. And my perspective would have changed, if that makes sense. And we would have gotten through the year, probably with less stress, with less debt, with less worry, because we would have balanced things of say, hey, let's put off this expense over here, or let's shift these kinds of things, or save this kind of thing. I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but it's really trying to just not get to the end of the year and say, oh, if I would have done that, if I would have saved this for taxes, if I would have done this, I could have gone through it. But so again, you feel like you're out of work at certain points, but you can kind of balance it. So it's getting that minimum budget as well as your preferred budget to go forward. And at the same time, like I said, the Kendricks had brought the video with their pregnancy center at their church that came up, and it was kind of going back to the corporate world versus doing the creative narrative type stuff. But Sometimes you wrestle with that of like, this is my calling. I can't do these kinds of videos anymore. And is that kind of my fallback plan? And I'm not directing, I'm doing these things. But when you really look at it as the needs of people, hey, there's this group that's saving lives. They have needs, whatever it is. I can help these people. I've got time. I can provide. Just go out and do it. And so that was kind of a struggle for me too, just because of the intensity of leaving and putting all that behind you and having God closing the doors and eliminating all of your clients, not having anybody calling you for any work. Meaning that there were some clients that had come to our production company for me, and some that came to the company. So there were some churches that really didn't see the production company; they just saw me as a creative. And so I thought some of those people might come and still call me for work, who didn't even know that I resigned from my company, and everything just dried up. And so, but really just trusting the Lord and, being a studio director and, having films in theaters and things like that, you're still living month for month. It's not this big kind of get rich scheme. But as well, it's creating passive income. That's one thing. If I could look back to my 17 or 18-year-old self, it's create as many passive income streams as you can. I recorded my daughter laughing as a stock audio clip, and she makes that one clip. It's like 12 seconds long of her laughing. Um, Makes me, I think, about $30 a month just on that one little clip. And I think I have in one library that's got like 12 clips, which is half audio and half video, over the last 4 or 5 years, I guess, since 2015, has made about $4,500. So that's something that I did two shoots. I did a little audio shoot. I did one little video shoot, put them up online, hadn't even thought about it. And there's an extra $4,000, about $1,000 a year just on stuff. So had I have started that 10 years ago and had things growing, had audiences growing, and whatnot, there'd be, a lot more safety. But in my experience, it usually comes down to $1,000 or less a month that that kind of can become problematic or can put you into debt or not into debt. And so, if one income stream makes $200, one makes $100, you just think about how that can add up and just shave off that little bit of stress every month. But if there's anything you can think of for passive income, start it, get it going now, rather than waiting until you think you're going to need it.
Yeah, those are really good points of trying to stay out of debt as much as possible can relieve a lot of that burden, especially when things get slow. You don't have as much of that still knocking at the door, being needed. And then knowing your numbers is also a part of that, and being aware of that throughout the year, not just at the end of the year. That's also something that's been helpful in knowing how to better prepare and plan throughout the year as well. And then the passive thing, where can people find, where do you have your stock stuff? If people just want to even go poke around and look at it, where can they find that?
Yeah, right now I've got stock stuff on Envato. I think it's videohive.net. I've got some audio and video there. So it's under Kevin Peeples or kevinpeeples.com on there. So I went to a Jewish temple and filmed their Torah, and that gets me. I think I just made like $40 on Friday, just from people buying a few packs from it. And so it's just every little dollar counts. Sometimes you think, oh, if I'm not making $500 or $1,000 at it, like what's it worth? But $40 is a date night.
Exactly.
It's like
Exactly.
yeah, I can take my wife out to dinner because I did nothing. It was just sitting there online. And so that's just a little bit of extra money where you don't have to feel guilty about some of the things that usually can push you over the edge.
So without completely going into another whole subject, but that's actually something that we've kind of thought about as we shoot different things. So what do you do from a legal standpoint? Like, you just mentioned you went to like the synagogue and stuff like that. How do you manage like the legal side of that, where it's like, do you have to get releases from everybody? Or even when, back to maybe when you shot some in the more commercial world, putting it in the contract, like what are some tips for people, like, as they're creating stuff, whether they're going out and shooting it specifically for stock or working on projects? Is there anything that you do on a legal side to make sure you can do that?
Yeah, most stock footage sites I've seen have a model release. So some of them are specific if you're using hands. Some of them it's only faces. So find out which place that you are thinking about putting up stock footage first, and see if you need a model release for hands or just for faces. And so when I went to that synagogue, I had a model release and I had a location release. and just said, hey, we're not going to give you any compensation. It was a pretty basic one. I can find online. You guys could also message me, and I can provide you guys with that one. But it's just a simple, location release saying we've got permission to use this. It's a one-page deal, but it's clear that, hey, we're gonna possibly make money off of this. Nothing is owed to you. We're going to use this in our projects, multiple projects, whatever it is. Give us permission to use it. And they were like, sure, as long as one of the places was just like, how are you using this? And just being transparent that you're not trying to use something, especially if it's from a faith-based organization that might be, different religion or different belief system than where you're going to use it. We're not using their Torah and anything that's going to be, um, speaking poorly of them or anything like that. We're just using it generically to sell footage of a Torah, online. We actually needed a shot of Hebrew writing for a project. And so, hey, I'll use it in this project, sell it as stock footage, and it's not going to be hurting you guys. So just being upfront and transparent. There was one synagogue we went to, and they were just like, since you're not really sure where you're going to use it, we don't really feel comfortable knowing where we're going to be. So they said no, and I went to another one, and we got permission. So sometimes that no can teach you, okay, I need to prepare my answers, or I didn't think about that, or so sometimes saying, I don't know what I'm going to use it for, that might scare people off.
Right.
Rather than saying, hey, I'm going to use it here. I know we differ than you on this. We're not Jewish, but it's not going to speak badly. We're just, passionate about Hebrew, or we want to show people the Bible. And they're like, oh, cool.
Which,
so
I mean,
just
I
being honest.
suppose, like, my concern has always been, like, we do a lot of stuff with law enforcement. So it's like, I don't necessarily want to put footage that we've shot of law enforcement out there in the world where somebody could technically license that and use it for something anti-law enforcement or something like that, which I don't feel like would serve a client well. So is there a way that you can, like, because you were mentioning, like, okay, it won't be used, like, negatively, but can you control that really when it's on a stock site? I know I'm kind of diving into this a little bit, but it just fascinates me.
Yeah, you can't really control that. Obviously, the stock places, say that you can't use it for a certain set of uses.
Sure.
But that's something too. If your clients are not comfortable with somebody potentially using police footage or footage in kind of a derogatory way in their project,
Yeah.
But most of the time, the people on there that are purchasing your stock footage are not going to be the top end people that are going to be shooting it nationwide, distributing it out there. Those people are typically filming things themselves or licensing kind of higher end packages that have a lot more clips in them if they need a series of things. So if you're kind of doing one-off stuff, but again, if you feel like your client or the person you're filming needs to know that, then let them know and see where it goes. But that hasn't been an issue so far.
Perfect.
One other question on the stock is HD versus 4K. Any input or preference?
Shoot what you have, make it look as good as you can. If we're talking about putting off passive income of, well, no one's going to buy HD because I don't have 4K yet, so I'll wait for it. The stock footage sites want, nice ungraded flat things that people can kind of control and do what with. So the stuff, that I have of the Torah was shot in HD right before the big wave of like 4K cameras came out, so that was back in 15 or so whenever I put it up. And people are still buying it today, as of like last Friday, people are still buying it. So there's still a market out there for that. But if you've got 4K, just get the best quality image that you can, and if it fits what somebody needs, they're going to buy it.
Nice.
One other thing back on family and balancing work and family, are you able to set kind of hours now that you work, or is it a little bit still of a sometimes you buckle down and are working and then sometimes you have off time and it's a balance and ongoing conversation? How does that work for you now?
Yeah, it really depends on the project too. There's kind of pockets of time, with filmmaking and directing in particular. There's a really intense period where you're gone. Sometimes your family can travel with you. We were blessed and fortunate to have Like Arrows filmed in our hometown, and so I was able to come home at night. And the kids just know during this time, Daddy's not going to be here for breakfast and for dinners. But you guys can also come and do set visits. So there's kind of extra trips and things that aren't normal. And so it's really kind of looking at it kind of like, you're on the battlefront, like, okay, we're going to hunker down and you're not going to see me during this particular time. And translating that into editing, if it's like, hey, I'm going to take a week and I'm going to work hard and I can knock this out, giving your family those expectations so they don't feel like you're disappearing, but they know that they can cheer you on and they can see the deadline. It's really the deadline or the lack thereof that's really caused the most tension, in the family, where I'm just going to go to work and I don't know when I'm going to be done. And that translates to, we don't know when we're going to see dad. So we just plan without him. But being able to say, hey, I need this time to hunker down, but here's the deadline here, make sure you over communicate when you see that window being done, rather than over communicating, I've got to get to work, I've got to get to work, and that kind of thing. And sometimes it's, put the kids to bed and work at night, balancing that with, with time with your wife, uh, but it's really kind of by project, you know as I said.
Yeah, I want to give a quick shout out to the folks that are watching live. NCR Studio has been asking some questions, and Danny, thanks for those questions. Those are great. Helps us know what's helpful for you guys to hear about. The other thing I wanted to point out was just that, as in some of that transition time, being able to make projects besides just directing is a helpful skill that you can, whether it's corporate, whether it's local ministries, just having some of those skills to fall back on and help meet needs, is really valuable. And I find encouraging to be able to serve people in that way. So that's still something that we enjoy doing from time to time. I'd love to hear more about your prayer strategy thing that you mentioned. Can you talk any more about that?
Yeah. So when I went into to War Room, realizing that I've got to start praying to get an answer. War Room was on prayer, and so when Stephen and Alex came out, they, at the meeting, he pitched this idea of specific prayers receive specific answers, and that was the first time that I really heard that in kind of a takeaway nugget of, the more specific that you pray, the more specific the answers will be. And so I went back home and I watched all the Kendrick Brothers movies, and I'm like, okay, I've got to figure out how I can get onto this movie crew. And one of the things in Facing the Giants, if you guys remember, where he was talking about preparing for rain and the two farmers, and who's the one who's ready to receive the answer to their prayer. It's the one who's preparing for rain. If they're praying for rain and praying for their crops to grow, if you expect God to be answering that, then you're going to be preparing for it. You're not just going to sit around and wait for it. So, going to the prayer strategy, I kind of boiled it down to these three things. One is before every effort prayer. So that's always praying first. That's not waiting until, okay, now I don't have any income, Lord, pray, what do I do? But it's praying first. So, Lord, is this the project that you want me to work on? Because if it is what you want me to work on, then you're going to bring the provision. And, Lord, we trust you with our children. And, that's one thing that we've seen throughout the years is every child that we've had, God has brought just the right amount of income to provide for the needs of that growing family, whether it's through vehicles, through food, through whatever needs that it is. But, but God provides for that. And then there's sometimes where you think, oh, well, I need more money because of this. And then it doesn't come and you realize, no, God's telling me to be content with what I have and to make work with what I have. And so before every effort prayer is the first one. The second one, overall prayer, thy will be done. And that's just kind of saying, again, it's not the answer that I'm looking for. It's really trying to align your will with the Lord's will. And that's where I really have seen the most success in my prayers, is following what the Lord has. And thirdly, it was after prayer, put yourself in the way of receiving the answer, be up and doing. So that's kind of the prepare for rain type of strategy. That's be the one to make the answer to your prayer happen. Not saying that the answer is up to you, but saying, if that's, I'm going to be preparing for rain, I'm going to be active, I'm going to be seeking and diligently searching for this answer and expecting God to bring that. And despite what you may think, God does answer every prayer. It might be yes, might be no, it might be later, but there still is an answer for it. And so It's getting that mindset of, uh, not just, well, God hasn't answered my prayer. It's what answer is he going to bring and how am I going to handle that? Is that a later? So I'm going to be doing something else. Is that a yes? So I'm going to prepare for that rain right now. Or is it a no? And okay, now I need to think through my strategy, go from there. So I started praying through those things and, at the same time calling different people on the crew that I had met at this meeting, some of the locations people, and they said, "Hey, there's no positions available on the crew. Sorry, but there's nothing we can do for you." And I was persistent enough that I got an in-person meeting with some of the people on the ground here, and they said, "Okay, if we find anything, we'll give you a call." And so 3 weeks went by, and I was like, "Okay, that's they're going to be shooting soon. There's just nothing, so I've got to go find something else to do." And I got a call from Aaron Burns, who was the associate producer on War Room, and he said, "Hey, we've got one position that has opened up, and it's in the locations department, which is kind of the bottom of the totem pole. It's the longest days. Locations are the people who get the trashes ready. They put out parking cones if there's any, restricted areas. They plan. Basically, they do janitorial work. They prep everything for the crew." And he said, "So we've got one position there. It's like $150 a day, and are you interested in it?" And he said, "Go home and pray about it." And I said, "Dude, I've been praying about this, and I've been praying instead of a particular position. I realized coming out of my company that I need to learn humility, and I really need to start at the bottom. I've been at the top. I've been getting awards and going around the world, and like I said, no one was following me as a leader, and so." God opened my eyes and said, "You need to learn humility." So I said, "Okay, I want to start at the bottom and do something that no one is going to see me, no one is going to notice me in my work." And so I gave him that answer that I'm up for it. And an hour later, Aaron called me back and he said, "I hate to tell you, but that position is no longer available." And I was just like, "Lord, what are you doing? What what is the meaning of this?" And there was this kind of a short pause, and he said, "Somebody, I do have somebody on the phone who wants to talk to you." And there was this another long pause, and then Stephen Kendrick gets on the phone, and he says, "Hey, have you ever done craft services before?" And I'm thinking, why is he asking me about craft services? And I'm like, okay, I'm going to be honest. I have done craft services as a producer on music videos, but like, he doesn't want me to do craft services on this multi-million dollar feature film. But I said, "Hey, I've done it before, but I'm like, I don't know." And he could tell that I was just completely bewildered at this question, and he starts laughing. I was on speakerphone, and some other people started laughing in the background, and he was like, "Dude, we don't need you for craft services." And so now I'm just like, my heart's beating, I'm nervous, I'm like, I don't know what to expect here. I'm talking to Steven, first time I talked to him, and he said, "Hey, we've got a behind the scenes position that has opened up, and uh, if you're interested in that." And I said, "I'd love to." And then we spent the next 30 minutes talking about spiritual questions and faith questions. He didn't ask me anything technical. He didn't ask me anything about my career, my achievements. It was all with, where is your heart at? Is there any sins that you're struggling with that would hinder unity on set, that would bring spiritual warfare to the set? And I was just like, man, even just this phone call is just that first step that I need in learning humility. And so after that, he said, "Okay, you've got my vote. I'm going to call Sony," and who is in charge of the marketing, which behind the scenes partially falls into the production budget, but also falls into the marketing and the P&A budget. So he said, "You've got my vote, but Sony's the one that's going to be hiring you to do that." And I ended up getting hired on Friday, and they were shooting on Monday. So I went with like a fourth of my gear and brought some other stuff in. And the other thing on the phone call, I said, "Okay, I've got to be honest. My wife is due with our child in about 5 or 6 days, and are you okay if we leave set to go deliver baby?" And I thought, okay, this isn't meant to be. I'm not going to get the job. They need someone there. You can't leave a 6 week film shoot for any amount of time and still get anything done. But I said, "I'm going to be honest. And if this loses the job, then the Lord will provide." And Stephen's response was that, he said, "Well, family's more important than anything. So you go be with your family. We'll make it work. Take as much time as you need." And that really just was kind of smooth sailing on that relationship. So we started on Monday, and we had a baby on that Saturday. And so I was out for just a couple of days, and I think we've almost had a baby during every movie production that we've done with the Kendricks. Um, so yeah, Alex had 6 kids when we started, and I think I've had 4 or 5 kids since since then. So that's definitely something that we'll not do again. We'll not be directing a movie and or even shooting and being away in a different state on production when my wife is in labor. Been there, try that, didn't work well. So just that's a big trusting the Lord thing. If a movie lands and a baby's coming at the same time, trusting the Lord, but being there for my wife is way more important.
Good. Is there anything else that you had prepared or wanted to share that we haven't gotten to yet?
Anything else? Uh,
One question, and this is from Danny, kind of brought this out in the chat, and I want to kind of pitch this to you, and I feel like this is actually a really good question, and I kind of rephrased it from what he said, but I feel like the question is, so a lot of us, we all talk about, just do the best with what you have, like do good work, and people will find you, those kind of things. But what do you do when you feel like you're doing the best with what you have? And you're doing the best that you know how to do, but it's not working. Like you're still not getting those opportunities. What should someone do in that situation? In terms of like both. I mean, I think the way you shared on the prayer strategy and that kind of thing is really really important. But even also in terms of like practical things that someone can do to kind of like whether it's level up their skills or network or I don't know. I'll just be curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, like when War Room came to town, it was that part of the prayer strategy. Before I had really kind of honed it down to those specific bullet points, was really trying to be in the way of answering my own prayer. And I knew that I had the skills, I knew that I had the desire, and that I could get the job done. But I didn't know if what position that was going to be in, and uh, so it was trusting the Lord that He was going to bring the opportunities to get into the filmmaking space and do it more as a ministry and a calling rather than a job, and as a business. And um, it was really really kind of being pushy in a way, but still being humble. And if I would have just said, sat at home and said, okay, Lord, I'm just going to wait and not prepare for rain, they wouldn't have known about me. And the Lord may have opened another door to get me on, but that might have been part of a lesson that I needed to learn. But, I was really eager and active to get in there, but at the same time saying, Lord, I want to be used, but I want you to use me in the way it was, whether it's behind the scenes or it's through the location department, and changing trashes and, wiping down tables. If that's what it is to give the message out, then, that's what I'll do. Like whenever we go to work on Kendrick Brothers movies, they'll say, you're not moving a light stand, you're turning the hearts of fathers to their children. And so it's this aspect of, I'm not just doing something technical. I'm here as a ministry, and um, so it was, again, I think if you look at it as not what can I do to provide, but what can I do to fulfill my calling, to fulfill my passion, which is glorifying the Lord and being as humble and serving Him through that process, God's going to bring those opportunities to you. And again, you need to be okay to um, not expect those to always be what you think they are going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I always wanted to be a movie director ever since I was 9.5 years old, and never saw it going in this direction. Never expected to be a studio director where somebody says, we've got the budget raised, you just need to go out and write a script, we're going to put the crew together for you. You don't dream of that, and that's just kind of how it's come. And getting to like co-write a script with Alex Kendrick is it's just mind-boggling, like to be with people who are so humble and so kind and so passionate about what they do. And just to be able to work together. One of my favorite things with the Kendricks, like we were on a job and on a location scout for the film. And after the day's work was done, we went, and over dinner, we're talking about how to, hold on and capture the hearts of our daughters, and really pour into them and keep that relationship as fathers. And it's like, these guys aren't sitting here talking about the best movies and the best, cinematography and all these things. It's like they're talking about family, and those are the moments that you really look back and say, this is why I'm here, and this is what I'm going to take away from it.
Mm.
I could care less what buttons are on the side of the camera, but knowing how to capture my daughter's heart when I get home, is key. And one thing that I just remembered, whenever War Room came to town, they were doing like crew applications or auditions on their website. And so you go in and you fill out the form and with what positions you want and what you're looking for. And, coming out of, the company, and it's like, okay, I feel like the Lord is calling me into film. I put on the form, I want to be a director. And, you know, half of me was like, Alex is never going to give up, this thing, because he's the director. But, at the same time, it's like, well, if I put it on there, then maybe, maybe they'll let me direct War Room when they come to town. And so I filled it off and sent it in. And that was one of the things of going in and talking to some of the producers in town was, I have filled out the application, and, it's in the system. And, so I also put I think it was like a primary job and a secondary job. And so primary, I put directing, and then secondary, I put behind the scenes. And it was like, there's no way Alex is going to just be like, okay, this random, 25-year-old kid's coming out of nowhere, and I'll let him direct the thing. But here, 5 or 6 years later, they've offered me to direct their next film, and, kind of in their place. And it wasn't until probably a couple months ago that I was talking to somebody else who similarly put their application in for War Room and was on the War Room crew. And just how, God kind of has that sense of humor. It's like, I went all out, I put it on there, not thinking that it would ever come true. And here I am, directing in place of Alex and having him as a mentor along the way, through the whole process. And it's just, as we've said, you're living the dream. I can't believe I'm here. And, if I had to give you guys kind of one takeaway, it's just be as humble as you can, and serve to bless and listen to others, not go into the meeting, not to go into the room and thinking about what am I going to get out of this? How much provision, how much did it, just go in there to say, how can I serve? How can I serve you guys on this? And if that's just for a day or two, then that's how the Lord needs you as a part of the body to serve.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And I was thinking about it in terms of and we have some great other questions kind of coming in on this subject.
Yeah, I'd love to answer any.
Because I feel like oftentimes, as I've seen, even as I run an agency, and we hire crew and things like that. Oftentimes we get people who maybe have the passion for something and maybe are really interested and even really want to get on our projects and stuff. But it's like, I honestly, number one, I don't know you. So that's honestly a huge barrier oftentimes. But then second, I don't see proof of, it's like, have you actually done anything? I think as many times as people actually hear us say, go do something with what you have, the number of people that actually go out there and do it is actually pretty small. So
let me tell you a funny story.
Yeah.
And then if you need me to fill in, ask me again.
Sure.
So when I started on War Room and got there on the first day, so Steven and Shannon, two of the Kendrick brothers, had seen some of my documentary work, and were like, hey, this guy shoots great interviews. He can shoot interviews for behind the scenes. But Alex had not seen any of my work. And so, I remember going in, and Alex was kind of like, who's this guy? What's he done? Why is he here? And the first day that we were filming, I'm thinking, okay, I've got to be this fly on the wall, but I've got to get and cover everything. And, everybody wants to see and hear from the director and the behind the scenes. And so I'm pretty close in Alex's face, trying to catch that audio of, I want a golden little quote that he has that he can deliver. And so, probably an hour or so went by, and Steven kind of pulled me aside, and he said, you could tell he was searching for some really nice words to say, but he couldn't quite figure out how to say it. He said, "Dude, you're kind of being annoying." And Alex says, "Get out of his face." So I was thinking, oh my goodness, I'm never gonna work in this industry again. I'm never gonna be working with the Kendricks again. And so on like day one to kind of be told like, you're being annoying and get out of his face. Like I disappeared for the next couple of days as far as I was not anywhere near Alex, filming him and worked that relationship up to be able to kind of jump in. And now we kind of have this dance where when he's done with the scene, he knows that if I'm there, he'll turn and he'll say something, for the bonus features, and then we'll kind of move on. And so I don't be pushy and things like that. But it's one of those things where you can make mistakes and really learn from them, and you can see that it didn't phase them enough to to cut ties with me. I'm still here, so it's the Lord's kind of working behind. So I don't know if that answered your question, if there's any more to that question, but
yeah, no, that's a really fun story. I feel like it depends on what's like. I think that's what I loved working with the Kendricks too, and working with you. Honestly, I felt sort of the same way. Like I'd never been on a feature set before, and I was like kind of thrown into the middle of everything. And I think honestly, I don't know if you could able to use any of the footage I shot the first day, because we were still figuring all that stuff out. But
well, talking about crew and kind of bringing people on, the one thing I've learned from being where I am in casting sessions and picking crew, working with people, the people who lose the job the quickest are the people who seem to be focused on kind of their own path, their own thing. People who are not humble, but it's you can have one kind of prideful experience, and that can be kind of how you're remembered. Making mistakes is not what's going to get you out of the business. It's how you handle that. So don't be like, I've got to go in and know everything and be perfect. But if you go in and think I've got to be the best and do all these things and like look, this certain persona, it's going to come across really prideful, rather than saying, like when you guys came on, it was okay. I've never been here before. How do I do this? And you were completely humble about it. And it was only like a 1 or 2 day learning curve to kind of get in the groove of what we were doing, and you go forward. But there's been people in the behind the scenes team kind of realm that have come in for a day or two here, versus just watching, on the crew and other departments, that come in and, are just prideful. And it's like, they're out. So I've seen people who just from one experience of being too prideful in their abilities and in themselves, don't get called back, on the shoot. So if you go in and say, teach me, the Kendricks bring in interns on their shoots. They've got interns in each department, and they love pouring into the next generation. So okay, there's other people who are here that don't know anything as well. There's a lot of people who it could be their first time, but there's professionals all around you, and just say, teach me what I need to learn, and learn quickly. That's really what's going to get you far in this business.
Yeah, and I want to bring up this question that Braden posted in the chat. He said, and kind of going back to this whole discussion, because I feel like there's a lot of people, and I know Braden, and I know we've had kind of this conversation before a little bit too, but it's like, I feel really blessed that we've just, in so many ways, God brought these connections. Like how we end up working with you and those kind of things was like, I wasn't pursuing that. It just sort of happened. But then there's a lot of people, it's like their dream is to work on a Kendrick set or, something like that. And unfortunately, there's also, 500 people that have that same dream that's probably reaching out to them constantly, so it's like, it's hard to rise above and actually get those connections. So this is, that's just a little bit of context for some of the audience. I feel like it's like, they feel like they want to do something like this, but they don't feel like they have that first point of connection. Like you had Kendricks were filming in your city. Some people live outside the US, or they're like, they're not in that same environment where they can actually be around people. So just jumping then to his question. So his question is, so how do you be in a, let's see, let me make sure I said, so how do you not, I think is what he meant. So how do you not be in the way of answering your own prayer?
How do you be in the way of answering your own prayer if you don't have the skills?
Yeah, or talents necessary.
How do you not be the problem?
Yeah, I was like, I need to read that correctly.
How do you not be your own problem and God trying to answer the prayer?
Right.
Well, I mean, again, I mean, the last piece of advice that I just heard from the Kendricks, from Stephen last month was start where you are and go forward as fast as you can. That was a piece of advice that I think their father had given them and that they had taken to heart. And you see where they are today. You see, that they're striving after humility in everything that they do. But it's starting where you are and going forward as fast as you can. So whether that's creating your passive income streams, whether that's trying to jump into film, really the most detrimental thing is going to be sitting there and saying, I don't know how to do this. I can't go forward, and just not getting anything done. But if that's, creating a reel and shooting it out, if, for us, it was a documentary that they picked up at a homeschool convention, and they passed it around. And, all I can say there is that was totally the Lord, bringing them at the right time. I have seen people who have gone out and kind of sought after them at film festivals and events. And, all I can really say is if you look at it as what are the needs that are out there, can you fill that need? Are you the best person to fill that need? You might not be. Like, I don't feel like I'm the best person to fit this need. There's so many people, so many directors that I feel are better and more qualified and more educated than I am. I've never gone to college for this. I just started a production company in high school, and just went with it with experience. We would do jobs where we would, maybe we shouldn't have done this as often as we did, but we would pitch ideas that we had no idea how to do, and then we would get the job, and then we would go learn how to do it. Whether that was, stop motion, on motion time lapses, and, those kind of things. It's like we've never done this before. And so, getting that experience and just realizing that, it's filling that need, and get experience. If you don't feel like, you've got to weigh in with the person that you're after, just start getting experience. And I think what I've learned is that the Christian industry is a lot smaller than you realize it is. The professionals working in everything from marketing to the crew, going to these film festivals and seeing these people that are on the panels, everything from the people doing Facebook copy to doing, distribution. It's really a small pool. And so, going to the film festivals and just starting to meet people, but being that person who's there to serve and not there to, hey, I'm going to give you my card and I'm the best person at it. Those are the people who are going to be like, you're just pushy, and there's so many other people out here that we can work with. So it's finding that balance, if I'm explaining that right, of not being pushy, but being available, being known, networking with people, but doing it in a way to serve. Just like, I would say in any friendship that you have, if you only go to your friends when you need something out of them, you've got a problem with your friendship. How many people, I would say to me, the best friends that I have are the ones that just come in and say, hey, what can I do for you? How can I pray for you? And it's like, man, this guy really cares. He's not trying to get anything. He's just trying to serve and bless. And that encourages you to be that kind of a friend, back to them. So take that, whether that's in your marriage and your friendships and your professional life. Just don't be the guy who's always trying to get something or use people to advance them, but go in and say, hey, how can I bless you? How can I serve you? I'm here. I need to provide. Everybody knows you need to provide. You're not there to be like, oh, I'm, a millionaire. I don't need any money. I'm just doing this for fun. Like, of course you need to provide. So we're all on the same playing field here. But just be that friend in any relationship, professional or casual. And like I said, through prayer, follow the Lord in his prayer and his answers to those prayers. And it may look different than what you're looking for.
Yeah, no, I think it's really good. I think just to really quick jump in on that, it's almost just trying to think in terms of specifically, since I know where Braden's at and stuff like that. Like, I feel like the reason for sometimes it's like there's steps, even kind of like for you, Kevin, where it wasn't, you've been doing other things and then they happen to have seen a documentary you did, and all these kinds of things. So it's almost like sometimes like focusing on what's the one thing you can do right where you are right now. Like, because I feel like it's easy to get stuck when it's like, I want to go and work on feature films and do this, but it's like, not everyone gets the opportunity to just jump from where you are to that point. So if it's like, okay,
Let me give you a practical example then. So coming out of my production company, we had just shot a documentary in which some of our interviews were like 4 to 6 hours long, and so we need to be able to record continuously, not have to worry about cards with the people, and so we built up this kind of hefty interview setup. We basically made it look like a studio, but we went and traveled to all the people because we couldn't afford to fly everybody to us. And so we had this carpet that we rolled out that had camera placements, and we had them color coordinated so that we could have 6 camera placements, 3 on one side and then 3 to flip. And we had all these spreadsheets that we designed so that in the documentary it wouldn't be too left heavy or too right heavy with all of the talking heads. And so we spent months on getting that going and getting the tech and the gear working to be able to shoot continuously, to be able to offload, create a backup at the same time, to be able to ship the backup back home. So long story short, we really felt like we nailed this kind of interview setup. And then motion sliders kind of started coming out right after that, so we advanced to that, and now the interviews that I'm shooting are 2 motion cameras on sliders, and so they're completely hands-free where I can ask questions if I need to. And so taking all of my lighting and cinematography background from my production company into shooting those interviews, when I started on War Room, it was under the premise that you're going to shoot behind the scenes, but someone else is going to come in and shoot the interviews. And I was thinking, hey, I've got this whole interview set up. I'm just going to bring it with me and kind of, be in the way of answering my prayers there, and try to be that guy, because I don't know who this other guy is who's coming in, and like, why can't I shoot everything? And sometimes there's, like when we had you guys on Overcomer, there was a need for me to shoot interviews and you guys still shoot behind the scenes and having a team. But on War Room, it was just me shooting everything. And so, you had to take a break from filming the making of to shooting these interviews. And so the way it worked out is they said, okay, the guy who's coming to shoot interviews is not available the first week, so we're not going to schedule any interviews the first week. And I thought, okay, I think I know how this is going to go. And it turns out somebody had an opening to shoot an interview, and they said, hey, we heard you had your interview stuff with you. Can you do it? And so I jumped in. I knew that interview setup, back and forth. We had it down to 43 minutes that we could set up from unloading the van to getting it out with a 2-camera thing, and so I knew I could go in and say, okay, confidently, okay, I need 45 minutes to set this thing up. I need this much space. I need all this. And so they were like, wow, like, you're really prepared with this interview thing. Okay, we'll go find that space. We'll tell them to come at this time. And so I shot that first interview, and they were so impressed. The marketing and the publicists were so impressed with the setup and how we captured those interviews that they called the other guy and told him they didn't need him. And I shot the rest of the interviews on that shoot. And that's kind of been in the marketing side, in between directing films, when I'm doing the behind the scenes aspect. That's really kind of what I've become known for, is shooting the interviews. And so I'll get calls, just to come in and shoot the 2-camera interview setups for, behind the scenes marketing. And so it's, if there's something that you say, this is something I'm really good at, where I don't have to go out and get any missing thing. I don't have to go learn anything. I'm really prepared for this. It was waiting for that opportunity, that window that I think the Lord opened up. So it's following, again, his timing, but it was being ready. It was being there. And I had no idea that I would be shooting interviews. And I've probably shot, I don't know what, 50, 60 interviews, since then, kind of with that setup and modifying that setup. So hope that helps to you guys that are here and commenting.
Yeah, that's awesome. Fantastic. So I don't want to keep people too long. I'm just looking in the chat here. JC, any final questions before we go ahead? And I'm going to try to do a little bit of a recap. I've been taking notes. And I don't know if, JC, if you have any notes, you feel free to jump in maybe with some conclusions, just to kind of bring out maybe some tidbits of things that summarize things and whatnot. But yeah, any final thoughts, JC?
No, I was kind of taking notes throughout, and just to make sure if there's any questions, I'm trying to recap as we went. So I look forward to seeing your recap of the conclusion.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this came across. Okay, I'll add this one as a recap. I think this one came across well, but it was I want to highlight it as the point of humility combined with confidence. And the key to that I was hearing from Kevin is that it's about serving other people's needs, not just promoting what you're good at. You might be really good, and there's not necessarily anything wrong with saying you're good, because that does help the other person know that you're an option to solve the problem they have. And so you are serving them in that way, but not pushing it to a point of um, arrogance, and that humility of saying, I'm here to serve a need. And if they choose someone else to serve the need, you're not going to go throw a fit about it, that kind of. So it's not just about handing out business cards and pushing. It's a really fine line, I feel like, a lot of the time, and being humble to serve, and yet developing skills that actually, Proverbs talks about clouds and wind without rain, or basically, a paraphrase, a disappointment, right? So don't not even if you have to go learn how to do it, as Kevin's talking about, you pitch something and then you get the job, you have to go figure out how to do it. You have to deliver on it. You have to solve that problem for them. And if somehow it's just out of the range and that's just not going to be the option, like, don't, that's arrogance then, to say I can do something if you can't. So yeah, be able to do what you're saying you can do, or find a way to do it, but then still be humble in that process is, I think, something you kind of have to practice and learn and work on. Coming back to your other thing though, Kevin, I think it's, had you responded differently to when Stephen came and approached you about that first day of doing BTS? Had you tried to explain to Stephen why you were right in the way you were doing it, or been back within an hour or the next day doing it again, you've crossed the line. That's not being teachable.
Right.
The trick that I'm talking about is being able to sit down or find a moment to talk to Stephen and say, here's what I'm trying to achieve. Maybe our goals are misaligned. Maybe I was thinking this is what we were trying to, and he says, no, over here is what we're trying to make. You're still learning and being teachable and serving their need. Maybe he's not going to teach you how to do an interview. You know how to do those things, but it's listening to how you can meet the need they have. And then maybe you are aligned. He's just saying, not during these scenes because Alex needs to focus or whatever it is. And being teachable, being part of the team, and coming alongside and helping them reach their goal is really the key there, I think, in balancing humility versus confidence.
That's good.
Yeah, very, very true. Yeah, it's definitely confidence over arrogance. That's a great way to put it there. And yeah, being teachable, seeing those moments, like you said, there are times where you've got to see that balance of, am I right here and they just don't understand, or I could have been pushy about being teachable and having good motives to it, or just saying, I'm going to go kind of this moment, kind of learn this on my own, in the sense of I'm going to back off and kind of do that dance and create that relationship again, and not being in his way, and deciding to go down that path rather than, coming across a little arrogant of, being right back in there. So yeah, it's finding that balance, in those moments, and yeah, really, really being teachable.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Really quick, before I do the summary, thanks, Danny, for reposting one of the questions that I forgot to get to earlier. He was asking, on a professional level like Kevin's, how important are specific skills like, say, After Effects or graphic design? How much do you use those skills?
Yeah, I would say those are pretty key in being able to, how do I say it? Maybe not, maybe to not lose. You might lose opportunities or lose maybe that foot in the door, if you don't have some of those extra skills, especially if you're, if the budget might be a little bit lower and they don't want to hire somebody else, or, um, you know, I'm just trying to think, for example, creating trailers and creating teaser trailers. There's the editing side of it, and it's kind of a battle sometimes to get that work, the trailer work, from the trailer houses and people that are, constantly creating trailers as their only job, for big projects. And uh, but I've had it to where through my After Effects, and kind of graphics design, I have created titles that they've ended up pulling and putting in the main feature trailer and things, because the people who are creating those trailers don't have as much of that eye in the After Effects world. And so it's kind of that whole kind of complete package. And so there's been some editing work and some trailer work that I've been able to acquire because I have those skills that can kind of beef up not only the storytelling and the editing, but then the graphics and the title work, which on a trailer is about half, or a third of the trailer. So, I don't know After Effects enough well to create stock footage packs in After Effects and sell them. I don't create the expressions and all those kinds of, extra widgets and things like that. But it's knowing it enough to be able to go in and create 3D titles and know how to balance light with readable text and text positioning. So I think in my line, I think on the graphics design, like the topography side, if there's anything you feel like can assist in some of those areas, it's learning topography, because you can take that into graphics design, you can take that into After Effects, you can take that into, whatever it is. And so, sometimes you end up creating end credits, for people because of kind of the creativity and the typography that you can bring in. So again, it's kind of like JC said, being confident. I was confident with that interview setup. Wasn't arrogant about it, but it was, I know I can do this. Here's, I'm showing you facts on how I'm confident about it. I can do it in this amount of time. This is how much space I need. If I don't have this amount of space, it's not going to look as good and this like that. I'm not being arrogant. That's just, here's how it's done. It's the same thing when you're running a business and you're giving out prices. If you say, hey, this is what it's going to cost, this is the cost that it costs me to do the insurance and the shipping. And, that's my cost. I can't go any lower than that. So if you don't want it, go find somebody else. When they see that you're confident in the prices and you're not like, well, if you could go for this much, or if you're kind of just in it for the dollar, they're going to see right through that and kind of see that arrogance of, I'm trying to get, the best price and the biggest job I can. And I've been there. I'm speaking from experience early on, where you try to pad your invoices because you need to pay certain bills and certain things. And it comes across to the client as you're being prideful and arrogant. But yeah, so I think you put it in a great way of confidence instead of arrogance. We really kind of work whether you're invoicing or whatever you're doing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Awesome. So with that, we're almost at an hour and a half here. So I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. I feel like there's so much more we could talk about, both even diving into more stuff on, I know you had some examples and stuff from the, when you were running the video company and stuff like that. So maybe we'll have to do a part 2 one of these days. But before we leave you guys, I just wanted to kind of run through a quick recap on some of these thoughts. And special thanks to all y'all joining us live, and hopefully to those in the future watching the replay as well. It's always great having kind of that feedback and conversations live. But so here's some of my takeaways. So first one is focus on what the ultimate goal of your life is, rather than just your goals as a filmmaker, and make sure that those are lining up. So pursue that. And then kind of let that be your North Star in terms of, for Kevin, it was like he was running this video company and kind of growing that, but realizing, okay, that's not really where my life trajectory is going. And so being willing to kind of like cut off the things that maybe aren't going along that line. It's so easy to have this extra baggage and be doing things that don't actually bring you along that path. Second thing is be a servant. So be servant-hearted, and that doesn't mean, being a servant doesn't mean not being confident like we just talked about, but it does mean not being arrogant in it. So there's a really good book that we always recommend to everybody. It's called The Go-Giver. And it really talks about that, where it's like just kind of having that, reframing how you think about business into being like a servant, and how that ultimately helps you as a business person as well. Third thing, and I think just kind of in Kevin's example, he didn't have zero experience as a filmmaker and then go and ask to be on BTS. And then you just won't get put in charge of something like that if you have zero experience. So be doing stuff that people can see. And so be doing it on your own first. I think so many people want to wait around for other people to give them those opportunities. And I know it's hard, especially for people maybe aren't as self-motivated, but if you can find a way to have somebody to keep you accountable, even if they aren't in film, but just go out there, do stuff, show your work, and let people see what you're doing, then people will start to think of you as that, and just be doing the stuff and taking those steps that are right in front of you. And that's ultimately let God kind of lead your path to like the big things. Like you can pray for those things, but be faithful in the little, and then he'll give you more. I think it's so easy for us to like always want the more, but to then be working for that more so hard that we forget to be faithful in the little. And then the fourth thing was family first. So this is a little out of order, but so kind of that thing of like with the family and work balance of like if your family is well taken care of in terms of not necessarily just financially, but being there for them time wise, it actually helps your work, and you probably become more efficient as a worker. That ends up helping better provide. So I thought that was a really excellent point. And then finally, and this kind of goes back to even like the Go Giver book, but the more valuable you are as a person, the more likely you are to be hired. In the sense of if like for Kevin, and the more likely you are to work up the ranks, so to speak, where it's like you may start out at the bottom emptying trash cans and stuff, and inevitably something else will open up higher. That if you have the skill set and you're confident in doing something else, you have that value there, you'll probably give in more. And if you're faithful in the little things, so if you come onto set and you have this attitude of like, why are they wasting my skills on emptying trash cans and like this kind of stuff, like you're probably not going to go anywhere. But if you're like taking that opportunity to be like the best trash can emptier on the planet, like kind of taking that energy and the initiation to whatever it is, they'll see that, and that creates trust, and then oh well, if this opens up and they kind of have heard that you have skills in interviews or whatever it might be, then those kind of ways that's how you work up. So those are some of my takeaways from the conversation. So yeah, thanks again for coming on, Kevin. It's always great to chat with you, and excited about where God's taking you in your career. And I mean, looking forward to hearing more about the upcoming project. And I'm assuming that, I mean, with COVID, that's probably been a huge, this could be another whole conversation, I'm sure, on trusting God and all of that. But yeah, thanks again for coming on with us. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you guys for having me. That was a great recap and a list. I'm taking notes on what your notes were, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's the awesome thing about these kind of things. It's really is a conversation. I mean, we all learn from it too. So anyways, awesome. Well, thanks guys. And I did just remember we're going to do a giveaway. I was like completely just remembered that. So sorry guys, we would have been more organized with that. So what we're going to do is we're going to, those who interacted live, I'm going to, I'm trying to think the best way to randomize it. So basically the giveaway is Kevin has a signed copy, I think, from the cast and crew, maybe from the Like Arrows project. So what I'm going to do is
actually from the Kendricks.
From the Kendricks, awesome.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is for you guys who joined us live, we're going to I'm trying to think, because I don't actually get your contact information. I was trying to think if there's a way that, because there's not like a way to randomize it while we're live. I'm trying to think how that would actually work. So what I'll have you guys do is if you want to send us a message through, I want to say just send us an email to hello@motionuniversity.org. Then you will have heard it here first, and we'll just count the people that send it like right after this video goes down. Then we'll take, I think there's like 3 or 4 people who've been interacting on the chat. So one of you 4 is going to win it, and then we'll reach back out with the winner. We'll just let it be a little bit randomized that way, so we're not picking favorites from the chat. We could do it by number of comments, but yeah, we won't do that. Some people were being very attentive and just didn't chat as much. So yeah, if you guys want to send us it, I'll put it in the chat here. hello@motionuniversity, make sure I spell that right, .org. If you want to send us a message there, then we will make sure to get you that DVD copy. So awesome. Well, thanks guys for joining. And one quick note for if you guys want kind of a behind the scenes look at some of how we go about the whole process of making projects to kind of just gain again that experience and confidence. We do have a new product we put out. It's like On the Job. So it's basically case studies and in-depth on different projects that we've done. So you can check that out on the Motion University store. Just want to throw that out there as a way for you to kind of get some experience virtually, especially with COVID and all that kind of thing. In case you aren't able to get on projects, it's a nice way to kind of like see, okay, this is kind of how the structure of things work. So just want to plug that really quick. Any final notes from you guys before we let these people go?
I'm good here. Thank you guys again for commenting, for joining in, taking your time today. And it was such a pleasure to be able to share share my life. Hopefully it's been a blessing to you guys in your career.
Fantastic. JC?
I'm good.
All
Thank you,
right.
Kevin.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, guys. We will see you all next time on episode 2, and we'll go ahead and go to the outro.